So the difference between a religion and a cult is basically, I used to say, just to be cute, the difference between a religion and a cult is the body count. The difference between a religion and a cult is a body count. A cult is a religion that hasn't killed enough people. And that does hold up to examination. If you look at all the deaths that can be attributed to holy wars or whatever else, you'll see that the world religions got 7, 8-figure counts just in the last century, right? But people don't like that. So then you could say, in a more formal way, a cult is a religion that has not inundated the larger society. A religion is a cult that has inundated. Christianity was seen as a cult until it took state power, until it associated and aligned itself with state power. Thanks to Emperor Constantine. Judaism was the same way. Judaism was some weirdo cult that eventually became a state power and established. Same thing with Islam. Islam started off as a band of zealous caravan raiders until they took state power. If Scientology took, I mean, it's what, and I think in our lifetime, we're watching a cult evolve into a religion, and that's Mormonism, which was a Christian cult that is pretty much respected. We've had one presidential candidate who was a Mormon, and that's the White Horse Prophecy. I ain't gonna get into the White Horse Prophecy, but we had a Mormon religious candidate. That would have never happened 50 years ago, 25 years ago, 30 years ago. I don't think it could have happened in the 80s. A Mormon, especially for Republican Party, because the Republican Party is a theocratic party at this juncture, or a theocratic cult. So if you're ever curious about the difference between a cult and a religion, or the transition from a cult to religion, you'll notice that cults are isolated from the dominant society that they're within. There's a level of isolation from family, community, and the larger society. Religions don't require that. So I could go become a Christian or a Muslim tomorrow and still pretty much navigate the world the same way I do. Show up at family gatherings, continue my relationship with my wife, and keep all my friends and all that shit. But if I go and become a Black Hebrew Israelite, or if I become a Scientologist, or go join the family, then it would require me to put my distance between myself and the rest of my community and my family. So that's one characteristic of a religion that doesn't exist within a cult. And then the punishments for violations. Like if you commit a violation of the tenets of a cult, the punishments are outside of social pressure and cultural norms. If you belong to Islam in America, which is different than Islam in Saudi Arabia, is different than Islam in Senegal, I'll admit, but you'll find that established religions, when there is a penalty, if you commit a sin of Islam in the United States, in Senegal, in Saudi Arabia, those consequences will be aligned within the social standards, social pressure, and cultural norms. But when you have cults, when you commit a cult violation of the cult, and it can be of varying degrees. Some places it can be very intense punishment, but those intense punishments are aligned with the larger society. Whereas in a cult, if you commit some type of violation, they'll lock you in a room somewhere, or they'll brand you or something. So you'll notice when cults start transitioning, they have fewer consequences. Like in one cult, Jehovah's Witness, that's a cult. If you violate the tenets of Jehovah's Witnesses, you get disfellowshipped. And when you're disfellowshipped, if I was Jehovah's Witness and I get disfellowshipped, I can't speak to my wife, I can't speak to my children, I can't speak, no member of the Jehovah's Witness can have any interaction with me. Now, if I'm a Christian and my wife could go to the pastor tomorrow and say, Pastor, my husband online looking at cheeks, he's looking at pornography online, he's drinking liquor, he's swearing and using the Lord's name in vain. Lord, my husband is a wicked man. Now, the Christian minister is not going to say, well, you don't talk to him and nobody in church. He's going to be like, well, you pray for your husband and you have him give me a call. You know, or if we're Catholic, they'll be like, well, tell him to come to confession, because the punishments are a lot less harsh. So that's another thing. Punishments for violating the tenets of a cult are outside of social norms and social pressure. And finally, cults have greater requirements for memberships and material contributions. You know, so if I become a Christian or a mainstream Muslim tomorrow, I ain't got to change my name. I ain't got to change how I dress. I mean, maybe if I dressed outside of the norm for a man, my wife might have to. But again, I could come on here and just have a little funny hat, and all of a sudden, you know, I done found God in some religion. But if I join a cult, that's a whole different ballgame. I got to change my name, drop my last name, and all this other weird shit. Start to dress and dress like everybody else and all this weird shit. So that's pretty much the difference. And those aren't very grand differences, because every single religion at one time had very harsh punishments for violations, isolated themselves. So every religion started off as a cult. And every cult, if it sticks around long enough, no matter how weird it is, it evolves into a religion. It's a give and take. The Mormons were like, what do I have to do to be a real religion? And, you know, okay, I'll stop polygamy. Wink, wink. I'll say that Black people have souls, because they used to teach Mormons taught that Blacks didn't have soul. Wink, wink. Give us an NBA team. Give us, you know, they went to New Orleans and colonized the New Orleans Jazz and brought them to Utah, as if anybody associates Utah with jazz. Weird shit. So religion is a huge cult, and a cult is a small religion. So murder cult, yes. And there's another component to a cult that overlaps with religion, and that's the bite model. Does your religion cause you to change your behavior or dictate your behavior? Does your religion control the type and quality of information you're allowed to consume? Censorship or self-censorship. Christian broadcast channel. They even got Christian movies. I can't believe y'all let that Cry Freedom movie. There's an anti-sex trafficking movie sponsored by the Mormon Church, which is a known sex trafficker. Y'all some suckers. Cry Freedom. What the fuck is that movie? Y'all get on my nerves. Ooh, what's that? What is that movie? Freedom movie? Sound of Freedom? Don't even make sense. Yes. Sound of Freedom. Raise your hand if you saw that movie. Shame on you if you did anything other than watch the bootleg. That is some Christian nationalist propaganda, and it is very dangerous. It ain't about saving children. It's about ownership, control, and manipulation of the suffering of children. But I ain't gonna get into Sound of Freedom. It just makes my stomach turn that Christian propaganda is outselling capitalist propaganda. Anyway, but yeah, there's Christian media, there's Christian music, there's Christian literature. So all your information, them pastors and the imams will tell you this is the good source to get your information. Right? Behavior. Yeah, we all know Christian and behavior. Your thoughts, thinking unclean thoughts and pure thoughts and the devil's thoughts or the God speaking to you through your thoughts, and your emotion. Emotionally stimulating and emotionally manipulating you, being in good standing with your church and your community or bad standing. Christianity, Islam, and Judaism all implore and impose the bite model on its members, i.e. victims. So even though formally, because it doesn't meet all the characteristics, it would be more appropriate to say male chauvinist murder religion instead of male chauvinist murder cults. But I think in this context, cult and religion are interchangeable, right? Some of y'all out there is like, well, wait, what about murder? And the reason I keep talking about these three religions, because I know some of y'all, you're a Muslim, and you really think your Allah is not Yahweh, and your religion is so different and unique, or your Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, and the Jews and the Muslims don't believe in the divinity of Christ, or you're Jewish and say, we set this whole shit off Abraham, we are the children of Abraham, God's chosen, but y'all all pretty much doing the same shit. Christianity is a bastardized remix of Judaism, and Islam is a bastardized remix of Judaism and Christianity with some Arab nationalism sprinkled on top, cherry on top. Because the main elements of those religions are all the same. Monotheism, they're all three monotheistic. They believe in all the same prophets except for two. Except for two. They don't believe, like, Christians say Jesus wasn't a prophet, he was God. Jews say he was real and he was a messenger, but he's not a Messiah. And the Muslims say that Jesus was a prophet. So they disagree a little bit on the status of Jesus, what Jesus can justifiably put on his resume, and then Muhammad. Muslims say he was the official and final prophet of God, and Jews and Christians say he wasn't none of that. But other than that, all the other prophets, Isaac, Abraham, whatever those funny ass songs they had children singing, all those other religions, it's all the same. It's more overlap. They got more in the fall of man, end times. The Christians and the Muslims, Armageddon, end times. The Jews call it the end of days or versus the end of time. They all believe that God's gonna put a plug on this shit, and justifiably so. They're all fucking, what do you call that shit? Apocalyptic religions. And they all believe in or Adam and Eve and the fall of man. They all say it's more they agree on than they don't agree. But it's not even that they disagree on something. They just, how they advance it and how they apply it. They believe the same shit, but they interpret it and apply it in a different way. I'm just saying, y'all not that unique. You're not that special. Right? And what about the murder cults? Okay, even if I believe it's religion, cult, whatever, we ain't killing nobody. Here are a list of capital offenses with Islam. Adultery, they can kill you. Witchcraft, doesn't even specific what witchcraft is, which is why so many women got burnt and murdered and mutilated and lynched, because there's no specificity of, women who were good at herbs, women who could read, women who had skills and ability, women who got old and the husband didn't want them no more and he wanted to get a young underage girl to bring in to replace his wife. Witchcraft, his wife is a witch. So you could be killed for adultery, you could be killed for witchcraft, you could be killed for murder, you could be killed for rape, you could be killed for kidnapping, you could be killed for consuming or producing pornography, you could be killed for apostasy. And apostasy is renouncing your religion and adopting, either just renouncing your religion and moving on, or renouncing your religion and following a new religion, or acknowledging another God other than Allah. Blasphemy, shit like displaying an image of Allah or denying the divinity of Muhammad, all that. Apostasy and rebellion. Rebellion against the state, rebellion against any authority is a capital crime. And I know some of y'all sick enough to be like, well, you should get killed. Y'all pro-death penalty maniacs, as if the state or religion ever should have the authority to take a person's life. Duh, when has that ever not been abused? And I know we in the West, we in the United States, we get a steady diet of Islamophobia. I acknowledge that Islamophobia is real, and I oppose Islamophobia. And 9/11, I lived in New York City, and I was a pre-med student at Brooklyn College. And I was in chemistry class on 9/11. I was in chemistry lab when the plane hit the World Trade Center. And I was taking my beakers because, we had to take they were like really tight on budget. So whenever you had to go and check out all your lab tools, the beakers and the burners, everything, it used to just be in the room on the shelves, but they had a locked room and you had to sign shit in. And so I took my wares for that day, whatever experiment I was doing, and I took it to the thing. And the guy behind the glass, who was a student worker, was listening to the radio. and kids don't even know what a radio is, FM radio. And they had taken over. He was listening to music. They shut it down and said, New York City's under attack. And so they ended class. After that class, I had a music interpretation and appreciation class, which I really liked that class. And that woman was actually Jewish, and she was crying tears, and she sent us all home. And I was actually like, oh, there was some accident, but hey, I'll get a day off class. Maybe I'll get off tomorrow too. Then I found out what it was on the way home, and I called my friend Woz, and I'm like, you want to go to Manhattan? So we walked across the Brooklyn Bridge, and we were actually there before the second tower fell. It's a crazy story. But after that, there was unrelenting attacks. They pulled up a barge, and they were just snatching anybody that looked. They were taking Sikh, they were taking East Indian people, anybody that looked swarthy. Anybody, they were snatching them. And I was in Brooklyn College, and I was working with the Palestinian students to fight against the persecution of Muslims, because I don't believe that Muslims should be persecuted. Let me tell you something. I love Muslims. I love Christians. I love my people. It is the institution, the oppressive institution with the power and the resources that I oppose. I don't oppose the people. I will debate, I will argue, I will disagree with the people, but I don't believe in persecuting someone for their beliefs, even if I disagree with their beliefs. And I believe in allowing people to do what they want to based on their beliefs, as long as they don't impose or harm others. People get that confused so much. So I was very active. I was very active in the opposition to the persecution of Muslims in New York. I mean, they were snatching people. If you look, like I said, a lot of Sikh people got beat up and locked up because they had turbans on and beards. Any man that wasn't with a beard. Shit was crazy. And it was weird because I go home in those following days after 9/11, and they'd be like, how America's coming together and how America's united and how we're going to stand together. And it was very violent. And I was out there advocating, trying to track people down. There were mothers, from Pakistan, ain't got shit to do with ain't never been, couldn't find Afghanistan on the map, just Pakistani Muslims, a lot of Indonesian Muslims that were in New York. In Indonesia, they're not even Arab, they're freaking Asian.